Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is the second clip in our series from the Mid-Michigan Autism Association for trainings that we like to do for communities. So if you are coming to this clip for the first time, you might want to watch part one first. So in this clip, we're going to be talking more about autism spectrum disorder and how that really is a spectrum and what does that mean. It's important to remember that autism spectrum disorder is a spectrum disorder. And that means that each child with ASD is different. Each individual is different. And the behaviors and symptoms can change over time. There are often pieces here that we like to highlight. And these are just some pieces of how ASD can differ across people. Remember in the first clip, we talked too about challenges can be different across individuals in terms of social communication and restricted and repetitive interests and sensory sensitivities. All of those things can vary in terms of how much support somebody might need to be involved in our community and feel supported in that way. But these are some other ways that this can differ. One important piece is age. So as people with ASD get older, the way that their symptoms may be expressed or the way that they express themselves might look different as they get older and sort of gain more skills or learn more about their own identity or just are shaped by the time as they get older, just like everyone else. So we might see even within one person that the way autism looks on them looks different when they're young versus when they get older. Another piece of this would be sort of cognitive ability and language development. So these are things that that can vary across people. So cognitive ability would be sort of like this IQ idea, which is like how much capacity your brain has to sort of do thinking and reasoning tasks. And that can really vary across all people. And it can also vary within the autism spectrum. Some people may have more or less cognitive ability depending on the individual person. The same as with language. Some people may have more language skills or abilities than other people. And the important thing to know is that everyone can learn new skills and keep learning over time. But these are just some other domains that can vary across individuals in terms of where they're starting with. And then another piece may include symptom severity. So the way I really think about this is, again, the level of support that an individual might need. So one person might not need a whole lot of support with social communication and sort of like engaging with other people socially and in a back and forth way. But maybe they really need a lot of help when their routines are disrupted. And maybe they need more support with that restricted and repetitive behavior stuff. Um, this can all vary across people and even within the same person. They might need more support with one area than another area. Awesome. Anything you want to add there, Kathy? No. Okay. So some strengths and weaknesses or challenges that may be associated for some people who are on the spectrum. So some challenges, like we talked about a little bit before, that might include having difficulty regulating their emotions, having difficulty regulating their behavior. Again, if someone is having a hard time communicating in a social context or having a hard time with repetitive interests or behaviors or sensory stuff, it's going to feel really overwhelming for that person. And it's going to be a lot harder to regulate their emotions if they're feeling stressed out or regulate their behavior if they're really overwhelmed. People on the spectrum may also have difficulty with more abstract communication. So more like metaphors or sort of like phrases that are not literal. These sorts of things may be a little bit harder for someone on the spectrum to pick up on. Also, sometimes getting like the big picture or themes that we kind of abstract from smaller pieces of information. For some people, that may be more hard. For example, sort of understanding like the theme of a passage in a novel may or may not be harder for someone on the spectrum. But if there's lots of pieces of information, it might be harder to kind of integrate that into an overall theme for that person. Sometimes we see that people on the spectrum have skill sets that can really vary across contexts. And so they may be really excelling in one area and may need a lot more support in another area, just like anyone else, really. But sometimes you might not have seen the situation or the skill set that they really excel in. And so it's important to kind of look for those areas of strengths. Another challenge can occur in terms of being aware of other people in some of the more nuanced ways of like social norms or some cues that people may be sending off that are not super explicit that may be harder for someone on the spectrum to pick up on. So these are some challenges that may be associated with the condition, but again, this is all going to vary depending on the person. Anything you want to add there, Kathy?
Yeah, my son, the awareness of others, sometimes when I'm talking to people, he just walks right like through. He doesn't like walk around. He just sometimes is not aware and definitely not getting the big picture. Doesn't really understand sarcasm, or you have to be very, very, very literal. You can't, say I see a pig fly, because then he'd be looking outside for an actual pig to be flying in the sky. It's very hard for him to pick up those social cues, but then sometimes not everyone has these weaknesses. It can be very challenging. It's kind of kind of what they say is, if you met one person with autism, one person with autism. So that's what's very challenging about raising a child with autism, because it can be so different, and it can be mild to very severe. So it does present a challenge, but we just try to work with work on the weaknesses and encourage the strengths.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really helpful to kind of have an example of some of these things. And hopefully you can also share some examples of the strengths and areas for celebrating that may be also associated with the condition. So a lot of times people on the spectrum may be very detail oriented and really great at paying attention to smaller details that other people may not be picking up on, which is a really great strength, I think, in a lot of situations. Similarly, we may also see people on the spectrum having really strong visual and spatial skills. And that can be really great in a lot of situations in the workplace or elsewhere, which is awesome as well to kind of play up on those strengths that those people have. As we talked about, often people on the spectrum have really strong areas of interest. And so they'll get really excited about certain things. And that can be really awesome if we can leverage that, because they will be some of the most enthusiastic people you'll ever meet, because they really, really love their interests. They may be really strong interests. And so they're really going to put their all into those things. And so it's really nice if we can play on those strengths as well. And the last example here we have is a lot of times people on the spectrum are independent thinkers. They really have this tendency to really like focus on what they want to focus on and really think through things that are important to them, and not necessarily being too preoccupied with social norms or cues or what other people expect of them. Again, this might vary across people, but it's really nice when you can meet someone in general who is an independent thinker and has that skill set. And you often might see this with individuals on the spectrum. So those are just some examples. Is there anything you want to add there, Kathy?
Yeah, Dominic, he has a very strong interest with calendars, We have calendars going back at least 3 or 4 years in our house, and he will sit there and examine each calendar. He does it almost nightly. He will pick up a big pile of calendars and sit there, and I've asked him, like, what are you looking at? And he's not able to tell me, but he will sit there and just is fascinated by what's on these calendars, even though he's looked at them multiple times. That, and he also plays the piano. Sometimes he will sit and play the piano for like 3 or 4 hours instead of playing for like a half hour. He will sit there and just keep going and going and going, and basically until I tell him to stop. So that's kind of a very strong area of interest. So, but like I said, it can differ from person to person. So it's you just got to try to work on the weaknesses and use the strengths to their advantage. So
Yeah, absolutely. You want to kind of find those strengths in each person and really focus on those as well, because that's what's gonna help them be the most successful. In addition to supporting them with things that are hard. Awesome. Um, okay, so this slide here, we wanted to highlight some things about what it's like to be a family member of someone on the autism spectrum. Here we're highlighting more about children, but this can really kind of cut across various relationships you might have with someone. So Kathy, do you want to take the lead on this stuff since you are a parent?
yeah, sure. We as parents, we are the biggest advocate for our child because we know them the best. And that's why we have them in Michigan Autism Association, to make people kind of feel less alone. We're all somehow connected to autism, some either parent or a caregiver. And we try to do, a lot of encouragement, and it can be very isolating to be a parent of a child with autism. Sometimes you can have more than one child in your family with autism. There are the high rates of parenting stress. The divorce rate is very high. There's also depression and isolation, especially during this time of COVID. It's even amplified it even more, the isolation. And sometimes just coming to terms with the fact that your child does have the diagnosis of autism. It can, basically it's like, where do I start? If you Google autism, it'll bring up like millions of things. That's what I did when Dominic was first diagnosed. I'm like, where in the world do you start? So that's why I'm so glad that we are so active in the community. We people can reach, we have a Facebook page, we have updates, we have a website. People are able to just kind of reach out and know that they're not alone. And sometimes just finding, even within your own family, that it's sometimes hard for those in your family to understand, because they say, if your child is having a meltdown, they could say, oh, why are they doing that? They should be quiet. Even within your own family, you can have people that are not your biggest supporters. And same with friends. You have to find friends that support you and not judge you. And one thing that's a huge consideration, even for me and for our family personally, my husband and I are both older parents, and just planning for the future. Where will Dominic go? Will he live with his siblings? Will he live in a group home? Will he live, it's a very, most parents don't like to think that far ahead, because it can be kind of scary, because you're not sure, you can take care of your child the best. It's like, where, how do you start planning? So that's why we'll probably have a webinar about that. We've had webinars about guardianship. We've done other webinars, and we like to be kind of like a source of information and support for those parents and caregivers out there raising those with autism.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, and I would just like I think we've kind of mentioned already, we're always looking for more people to join and get our updates. We're also always looking for people who might be interested in more involvement, like on the board, family members, individuals on the spectrum. Like we would love to have more involvement from the community. So please let us know. You can find us on um, online and our website, and we can put our email in there as well. To if you want to get connected to our resources, we would love to have you. Um, awesome. Okay, well, that is the end of this section, and please come back for the next section.